Namaste and welcome everyone to the CCC podcast. Today we have Arjun Khanna with us. Arjun is an alumni of the Sri Ram School from the Aravali campus. He passed out in 2015. Thank you so much, Arjun, for making time and joining us today for the CCC podcast.
Hello, and well, thank you for having me.
Wonderful. It's great to have you here. Arjun passed out, like I mentioned, in 2015, and from there he studied at the Ashoka University, graduating with politics, philosophy, and economics. He now works for the development sector, and he is here to talk to us about his journey from school, college, and the kind of work that he does. Thank you so much, Arjun, for coming and talking to us. Just to give you a little brief about the CCC podcast, we are having or running a series of short podcasts where we talk to industry experts or subject matter experts about what are some of the careers that children can look at, not the very conventional one, but even the not so conventional one once they pass out of school. Right. So today I'm going to just have a, kind of a conversation with you, have a few questions. So here we go. So, Arjun, tell me something about your journey from school to college. What are the subject combinations that you have, and why did you choose the university you decided to go to?
So when I was in school, I graduated from Aravali, and I graduated with commerce stream. So my 12th grade subjects were commerce, economics, accounts, English, and math. Uh, Surprisingly enough, I went on to study nothing to do with commerce at all, as is the case with most people you'll find. I went on to Ashoka University, where I originally actually applied when I planned on majoring in economics because that's where my interest lies. And it was actually at the university that I discovered that there was a lot more I was interested in rather than just economics, for example. And that's actually one of the critical reasons why I picked the university that I went to, because Ashoka follows a liberal arts system. And I guess now it's picking up a lot more in India, but back then it was still kind of a fresh concept. And the idea is that you get to have a lot more control over your own education in the sense of the kinds of classes you choose or the kinds of courses you take, where I have a very diverse education at the college level. My major is in politics, philosophy, and economics, but I also have a minor in sociology and anthropology. And you'll find that in the contemporary academic world, at least, or even in the professional world, working in a single discipline is kind of outdated.
Mhm.
Almost anything that you're doing in contemporary academia is going to be interdisciplinary to some degree. And having an education at Ashoka, for example,
Mm.
allows me to get that and kind of dip my toes everywhere just at the start and discover what you truly like.
Mhm.
One major advantage was that when I decided a year in that I didn't want to major in economics,
Mhm.
I didn't have to major in economics because
That's a
as long as
relief.
you get your credit, you're good, right? I mean,
Yeah.
my degree still has economics in it. It's not that I abandoned it completely, but I found that I was perhaps more interested in philosophy. My specialization is in philosophy. And
Mm.
I did actually teach for a semester as a teaching assistant on classical Indian philosophy.
Yeah.
But I think the main advantage is A, having that freedom to explore really,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
B, you're really learning from multiple places. You're not
Mhm.
pigeonholed into a single discipline.
I think that is, I think, very important because when we look at education, we think of it ideally as being freeing. We don't look at it, or we shouldn't look at it as, compartmentalizing us, that, this is your specialization and you can't move here. But I think that liberal arts does that. So just for all of us, what would be your understanding of what is liberal arts? Like when we throw this word around quite a lot, but exactly what does it mean to you, or what do you think the definition should be of liberal arts?
Well, I don't want to get very, I wouldn't say definition, of
Mm,
course, because I'm not going to get very particular about it. But
mm,
to me personally, what it is about is a holistic education.
mm.
That's something that Sriram talks about a lot as well.
Yes,
It's built into our own curriculum, the way we
yes.
learn at school.
Mm,
But the idea is that when I think of my time at Ashoka,
mm,
I specialized in philosophy. I don't use philosophy every day in my work.
mm,
I don't, of course, say, oh, what would Kant do every time that I need to do some daily task at work, right? It's not
mm,
part of my day to day.
mm,
What's important for me
mm,
and for a lot of people from the study of philosophy is learning how to think, learning how to
mm,
approach problems, and being able to build systematic understandings of things. It's very analytical, it's very logical. And so that's something that a lot of students I get, I guess, also experience with programming or computer related subjects, where that kind of an approach and that kind of thinking is something that's gone on to help me immensely and will go on to help you immensely in any kind of career that you work on. Of course, a lot of philosophy graduates go on to law school because it is a critical competency if you ever want to become a lawyer. You need to know how to be able to read, write, and think in that manner. But even if you're not a lawyer, no matter where you work, anything that involves any kind of analytical thinking, it's a skill that helps you. So I don't think of my education at Ashoka as, oh, I read these three texts by these three people, and this is how I view the world. It's not so much about the content of the text as much as the how of the text. You're not developing, you're not learning in the sense of memorizing, as a lot of people often complain, but you're learning approaches, you're learning how, you're learning skills. And I think that's very important for any college level education. And you'll find that even at Ashoka, we have a fellowship program, a postgraduate diploma. And a lot of students will come for that after doing a technical undergrad. So they might be from medical, they might be from an engineering background, because even having that 1 year of exposure to this kind of content, I believe, and maybe they believe as well, is something that's very important to personal development and even professional development.
I think you've really put it very beautifully when you're talking about how it's not just about what you are studying, but how you are
Yeah.
studying it and how you are going to use it in your future job, whatever that career might lead you to be. And that leads me to my next question, Arjun. Post Ashoka, what are you doing?
So I work in the development sector, and often when I say development, people get confused. It's a very esoteric term,
True.
but social sector is where it's easily understood. We
Yeah.
work on financial, social, economic, psychological, personal development. So that's the field that I work in now. I currently work on a research and learning project, which is focused on digital technology and gender. So we look at the relationships between mobile phones and women's empowerment within women's empowerment collectives in rural India. And I work in the sector as a project manager.
Okay. That's wonderful to hear. And what drew you to this sector, Arjun?
Sorry, I didn't catch your question.
My question is, what drew you to the development sector? Were there some campus placements, or or in your third or fourth year, you started looking at this sector? So how did you land up here, as it were?
So this is something that I would love to talk about because for me, one of my problems was no one ever talks about the development sector when you're in school. I'd always, you have these common misconceptions of charity work or what that means,
Yeah.
what being in the social sector means, chappal and chola.
Yeah.
It's only really when I was at university, at college, that I started understanding the development sector a bit more.
Yeah.
Ashoka is one of those schools where you'll find a large amount of students are interested in development work. You'll find that same kind of an interest at places like TIS or JNU, Ambedkar, schools such as this, I'd say, more than others. And that's kind of where I was introduced to the conversation, but I don't feel like it's a conversation that a lot of people have in terms of professional terms. What drew me to the development sector actually was I've always known that I wanted to do something academic, but I'm not necessarily the most interested in teaching, maybe even at the college level, right? I do enjoy teaching. I have done it for a couple of semesters. My main thing is that I didn't want it to be purely academic or purely theoretical. And a lot of people have this complaint of, for example, armchair sociologists, right? Is you sit in your room and you write about how the world works and you don't really engage with it in any way.
Yes.
The development sector really is a site of applied theory. It's a good mix of this academic theoretical side. So I am still developing theories. I am still writing journal articles. I'm still working in academics, but I'm also actually implying the theories. I'm testing them on the ground. We're seeing what works and what doesn't. Where were we correct? Where were we wrong? So I find a good mix of hands-on and theoretical, which is my personal interest in the space. Of course, my other personal interest in the space is that it's not necessarily contributing to the things that have made the world the way they are, the way it
True.
is right now.
True. True.
It's seen as solving problems.
Yeah. But I think we all need to do our bit. And I think that, with the kind of education that you have, you're very well placed to become a part of this growing tribe of, people who are looking at issues in a far more nuanced manner. So, Arjun, if you could just tell us about some of the skills that are required to work within the development sector, it'll be great.
So I wouldn't say skills as, specific skills. It's not like, oh, knowing MS Excel makes you a
Yeah,
good fit for the development sector, right?
true.
Um, First and foremost, what I think is critical, and I've talked about this, is just the
Mm,
ability to think analytically.
mm,
That was my education philosophy. It comes from some people's education programming. It comes from different sources, but it
mm,
is a very important skill,
mm-hmm.
especially when you're working with a lot of theory.
Yeah.
Um, Moving on from there, a lot of the work I do now is research. So actually having research skills, understanding how studies are designed, how surveys are
Mm,
written, how to
mm,
analyze and interpret results. That's something
mm,
that's really important in this kind of a space,
mm,
even if you're not a researcher yourself.
mm,
So even though I'm a project manager, I'm still
mm,
expected to be able to understand the
mm,
results and the data that
mm.
I'm looking at.
Yeah,
So that's something I would say critical.
yeah.
Another one that's again a more general skill, but I have benefited from personally
Mm,
immensely, I would say,
mm,
is just communication skills.
mm.
Um, Being able to say the right things to express what you want to
Yes.
communicate. Uh, this comes from maybe English language in school, but it also
Mm,
comes a lot from philosophy,
mm.
where you're really taught to select your words very carefully,
Yes.
the terms that you use and the ways that you express
Mm,
yourself. And that's a skill that's crucial
mm,
for any
mm,
professional space that you work,
mm.
or even personal spaces.
True.
It's these general things that kind of fit in. And then when you're in the development sector, of course, you do specialize. So I work on gender and technology.
Mm,
Other people work on water and sanitation. So you have those kinds of technical specializations,
mm,
as well as what they really, well, I guess the most important thing is,
mm,
even if you're not a sociologist or an anthropologist,
mm,
you need to have a keen interest in those disciplines. You need to be able to read text from them. You need to be able to understand what's going on, because critically, that's what the development sector really is about, right?
true.
Is it
I
is
agree.
applied economic geology.
Yes. That's very interesting. So Arjun, you moved to the development sector because you started thinking in that manner. You were trying to make connections. You saw that, something as simple as a mobile phone and how does it work towards women empowerment. There was something going on, right? But if a person with your background doesn't want to get into the development sector, what would you say would be other career options that they could look at?
I'd say, I have the luxury of having a very diverse degree, right?
Yes.
There are, for me personally, it was always, I wanted to do something academic, but
Mm,
as I mentioned before, a lot of philosophy
mm.
grads want to become lawyers.
Yes.
You can always take the academic route, right? You can do your master's and your PhD. You can
Mm,
then work as a researcher
mm,
somewhere. You
mm,
can work as a
mm,
professor. You can
mm,
teach at a university.
mm,
There is that route of things, and that's the professional route of things.
mm,
Um, I am a strong believer that your undergraduate degree, unless in a technical subject,
mm.
is not, very defining in terms of your professional career path. Like I said earlier, I believe it's more about the skills than
Yes.
the actual content of what you're
Yes.
learning.
Mm,
And with the degree that diverse, or with the liberal arts education, you're essentially open to anything. Of course, there are certain things I can't do, right? I'm not going to become a doctor unless I
true.
start all over again in medical
Yes.
school.
True.
But in terms of what are, I'd say contemporary professions or the
Mm,
professional world,
mm.
there is a lot you can do. I can move from where I am right now into the tech world,
Yeah.
because what I work on now gives me a very strong understanding of how users interact with technology,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that's infinitely applicable on that side
Yeah.
of things.
True. True.
Um, I think it's more about the skills and the specialized bodies of knowledge that you build, right? So
Mm,
mine is gender, technology,
mm.
and like internet
Yeah.
culture, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Other people might build other specialized bodies of knowledge. So
Mm.
a lot of people I know, for example, from my class went on to become CAs and then become actuaries.
Okay.
So there
Yes.
is this whole idea of transition that you're allowed
Mm,
to do.
mm.
It's not that you're pigeonholed into a single career path from
Yeah.
anywhere.
So actually, there is a lot that can happen, right? So at a personal note,
Yeah.
Arjun, do you have any hobbies and passions which have fueled your journey into liberal arts and then onto the development sector? Do you think that, I
I'd
mean,
say
you did have
primarily.
academics, but anything at a personal level?
Uh, so my hobbies at school, of course, I was very involved with music, and with Model United Nations, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd say they haven't directly contributed to my career path or my academic discipline in any way.
Mm-hmm.
What they have contributed to is a personal ability to like express. So if you do want to be an academic, or if you want to be anyone really ever,
Yeah,
you're going to be able to need to speak to people, and you're going to be able to
absolutely.
need to do it in public, and you're going to be able to need to do it confidently, and that's something that I'd say activities like those really help me build.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this one is perhaps what children would or what students would consider a lame answer, but
Yeah,
reading is
reading.
critical to how we
Yeah.
understand the world. I know it's a very ambiguous thing to say, just reading, but it's really when I started reading more texts about the world is when I found myself more interested in these kinds of things. Um, it's when I branched out from reading just fiction, or
Yeah.
it's like watching documentaries, right? It's when you
Yes.
expose yourself to more
Mm.
information that you have
Mm.
more ideas.
Mm. So I know that everybody will have different ideas of what they should read and what they shouldn't, but would there be someone who's wanting to look at liberal arts, someone who wants to study, say, sociology, political science, or psychology? Would you say that there would be some books that they should definitely read when they're in their grade 11th and 12th? Or maybe even earlier 9th, 10th, something that you think really, started you on this journey of, thinking and interdisciplinary approach, books.
Mhm.
So
Uh,
any book
this is
or
actually going to be a bit different because the ones I'm thinking are kind of college reading level.
Mhm,
But there are more simple and more accessible texts. I'd say one is Tetralogue
mhm,
by Timothy Williamson.
mhm,
So Williamson does a pretty good job of introducing students to epistemology, and epistemology is essentially the study of knowledge.
mhm,
What do we know? How do we know it? Um,
mhm,
and he's also looking at some questions of ethics and morality, right? What is
mhm,
right in the world? What is
mhm,
good? Williamson offers a pretty nice introduction.
mhm,
Another one that I think, particularly for people that are interested in psychology and philosophy, is a book called The Other Minds
mhm,
by Philip Godfrey Smith.
mhm.
I lovingly call it the octopus book. And what Other Minds is about is questions of consciousness.
Ah,
When we talk about human consciousness, right? There's something here. We seem to exist in a sense and we think about things.
mhm.
It turns out that cephalopods, so octopods, squid, cuttlefish,
Yeah,
are very similar to us in many
yeah.
ways. And
Mm,
Smith is essentially exploring questions of human consciousness by
mm.
talking about octopods. So he's the octopus guy.
He's the octopus
But
guy,
these two,
yeah.
I'd say, are
Huh.
pretty good introduction texts to philosophy for
That's
people.
that's absolutely fantastic. My last question to you, Arjun, though I don't want this conversation to end because I'm getting to learn so many things from you. What does the future hold for you, Arjun? Where do you see yourself going? Are you going to be here working with, gender and digital content for a while, or do you think that you would want to change, or where do you think you're going?
I Well, I don't know partly, and partly, well, I do wish to return to school. I
Yes.
am looking at doing graduate school for my master's degree.
Mm-hmm.
I will be continuing in the discipline that I work in. I will still be working on the sociology of technology. I do plan on working on social and anthropology. And of my, I have other academic interests. So I am also interested in urban spaces, for
Mm-hmm.
example,
Yes.
and exploring those through sociological lens.
Mm-hmm.
I do see myself working in this part academic, part applied academics field for the considerable future. From here, I could move on to consultancies, for example,
Yeah.
working on projects. I could move on to another international organization such as the UN or any of those
Mm-hmm.
projects.
Mm-hmm.
I can always move to the private sector. The skills
Mm-hmm.
that I have make me a perfect fit for the technology space. I could
Mm-hmm.
move into
Mm-hmm.
the consumer research space.
Consumer research. Wow.
It's again not so much, I'd say, what you studied in school as much as it is the skills that you end up developing.
Yes. So thank you, Arjun. Thank you so much for this really interesting talk. You encapsulated what should be the journey of a student, not just concentrating on learning what is in the text, but actually trying to interpret it, and then, trying to make those little dots, little connections with what is happening outside. You can be a physics student, but if you just, think about what's on your text, you will just know that much. You will not learn to explore and add to your thoughts and move ahead and develop the skills which is necessary in any job that you take up, right? It's not just about being a lawyer or a development sector specialist or anything. You do need to have, the skills that you talked about. You do need to have them in any field, and it can happen if you push yourself, if you want to look beyond. I think that's really important. So thank you, Arjun, so much for coming and talking to us. This has been most interesting, and I think that the children are going to get a lot of inspiration from you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.